Adam, Bill Belichick, along with Chancellor Lee Roberts and Athletic Director Bubba Cunningham, met with the press, huge crowd of media, athletic department folks, university folks in the Blue Zone there in Kenan Stadium on Thursday afternoon. Michael Lombardi, Coach Belichick's announced GM, someone he's worked with at the pro level, was also there in attendance along with Julius Peppers. Those two walked in right before the start of the press conference. The only ones speaking were Chancellor Roberts, Athletic Director Bubba Cunningham, and Bill Belichick. Adam, your takeaways as Coach Belichick met with the media for the first time as the head coach of the Tar Heels.
It was kind of like Bill Belichick press conferences I'd seen on TV.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the Carolina connections that they made right off the top. What a pull by Coach Belichick bringing in his dad's Tar Heel sweatshirt.
Yeah.
I bet some more of those get sold in the weeks to come. I had someone ask me an interesting question that I wanted to get your thoughts on. In terms of big press conferences that we've seen in our short time here at Carolina, how would you compare that one to when Coach Williams came back? And are those the two standard bearers of, like, hotly anticipated press conferences?
Probably. I mean, as far as I do think Mac Brown's second tenure press conference was a big one. Anytime you're announcing a new football or basketball coach, that is a huge deal in the college athletic world. So, I mean, all of those that I have been around have been well attended, big deals. But those two, the ones you mentioned, Coach Williams becoming the head coach and now Bill Belichick, I think were the most anticipated huge names in the athletic world, and big moments for the University of North Carolina for very different ways, but very big moments. Adam, I think, and not a big surprise, I think this is the least flashy one that I've ever seen, because Bill Belichick doesn't need to, quote-unquote, win the press conference. And he was great. I mean, he answered the questions. He was personable. I'm not suggesting that it wasn't that. It's just he doesn't need a lot of gimmicks or sayings or let me make sure I hit the joke right here. Like, he doesn't need that to win the room. He wins the room by showing up. Like, he's that big of a celebrity in the athletic world, and he is that accomplished of a coach that it doesn't have to be anything extra. Now, there were some memorable lines in there and things like that when he was asked about concerns from the outside that he might leave if he was successful back in the NFL, and he said, I didn't come here to leave. I thought the part talking about when somebody asked him about his dad and the influence that his dad had on him, his dad, who was an assistant coach at Carolina for 3 years, which is the tie in the past for Coach Belichick to Chapel Hill. I thought that was really interesting, talking about learning to see the game as a coach through his dad and his memories of being on campus at different times, both as a youngster and then, although he was very young, and as a coach coming here to scout at different times and things like that. He had one answer, I think it was actually the one about his dad, that was a longer answer, and he kind of joked in the middle of it, like, oh, sorry, you know how I like to ramble in press conferences. So, I mean, there were those kind of funny moments and things like that, but there was no, I'm going to hit my scripted joke or I'm going to nail my tagline right here, because he doesn't need them. He brings the credibility simply by being there.
Right. Yeah, I think the thing that was different about this one than any other we've seen is there was almost like kind of an air of curiosity in the room.
Yeah.
Of like, is Bill Belichick actually going to be the football coach? Is he going to really come in here in this room And
where I've been before?
Yeah.
And I'll be on that stage that I've seen other people on?
Will he have on a Carolina blue tie like sometimes the coaches do? Look, he does. So to me, that was the difference. Like the Roy Williams thing, there was a familiarity there where you were welcoming back someone you knew and already knew you loved. This was like, this guy I've seen on TV, and now he's going to be here in person, and I think he's going to coach the Tar Heels. And he could have said anything up there. It really didn't matter as long as he actually was Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
And he was. But as a bonus, I thought all the things he said were positive. I think if you came away with one football takeaway, it's that Michael Lombardi is important.
Yeah.
And is going to be very involved in all the important aspects of Carolina football going forward. And that's a name to know in a way that I'm not sure your casual Carolina football fan knew, for example, Patrick Suttis.
Sure.
So I think you're already starting to see the difference in structure and how that will be different on a day-to-day basis.
A lot of questions about the college game being more pro game now and running things like a pro organization. And yeah, I don't know if there was any breaking news in any of that because he's talked about some of that. His time at Washington this year was Washington, the University of Washington, where his son is currently the defensive coordinator, seemed to be impactful on him. He talked a lot about kind of going to college games and experiencing college football from a different, or experiencing football from a different angle, which I thought was relevant. I thought another one of the parts that stood out to me was when he said college kind of came to him this year, and he talked a lot about speaking with a bunch of different coaches about some rule changes, which honestly was something I hadn't thought about, Adam, but the 2-minute warning with 2-minute timeout in college football, the helmet communication, all this stuff that was new to college football, the tablets on the sideline, all new to college football this year. And he talked about how many coaches that he knew had reached out to him to just ask him, how do you manage? How do you use that 2-minute warning? What do you try to do around, like things like that I hadn't really thought about, that just kind of naturally got him thinking about the college game a little bit more. And of course, his time around the Washington program, which he had high compliments for. I thought all of that clearly played a role in him being more comfortable, I think, to make this move to college. And then, Adam, the fact that he did say that the fact that Carolina had a tie that he felt was important was impactful as well. And, yeah, his dad was not best. I mean, his dad was decades at the Naval Academy. That would be where he had the strongest tie, so be glad the Navy job wasn't open, because it seems like he legitimately has a desire, at least from what I took away from it, Adam, and from a little bit of what we've heard from some of the interview parts, and by interview I mean when he was interviewing for the job, that he seems to have a real desire to coach, teach, build a program, those kind of very core things of being a head coach and running a program, I do think are still attractive to him.
I would really commend to you the story on ESPN.com by Seth Wickersham. To me, that's the best thing I've read so far on how we kind of got here and how Bill Belichick went from I am exclusively an NFL guy to I am a little intrigued by college football to where we are today, where I am the coach of a college football team. Seth is a guy who's written a book on the Patriots and knows everything about that organization and the people who have come through it, including Bill Belichick and a lot of his confidants. And you can tell he talked to all those people for that story. That's a great story. And I think we'll give you some insight into this and some insight into Bill Belichick in a way that we probably don't have just yet, as we haven't really seen him operate. I did think one thing that was very interesting was he just kind of threw out about the 1980 Tar Heel football team and said they had given up 120 points and half of those were against Oklahoma. And he was off by a little. They gave up, I think, 131, 133, somewhere in there. But just to throw out that fact, I think shows you the level of preparation that you're dealing with, and the fact that this isn't a guy who's just here to check a box. He is invested. And maybe he just looked that up right before the press conference. I don't know. But if he did, he did.
Yeah.
And that's something. And I think we're going to see more of that as we get exposed to him more, where he does have this deep history in the game, where we're going to talk so much more football than we've talked recently, with a historical slant that is very well educated across the game.
Adam, last thing, I would encourage you to go back, if you haven't, and listen to the emergency podcast that Adam and I did late on Wednesday night, where we gave you half an hour of just kind of our initial reactions to Bill Belichick and the commitment that Carolina's made to the football program, which Bubba Cunningham did touch on. He was asked by David Teal, fantastic reporter from Virginia and who covers the ACC so well, if men's basketball and football can coexist at an extraordinarily high level. Can it be supported at an extraordinarily high level? I think a very valid question. And I think a question that some people at Carolina may have.
We got an email about that question from a listener.
And Bubba talked about absolutely how important those two sports are, which we all know. Basketball's relevance at Carolina historically and financially is different than at most other places. And so Bubba talked a lot about those two and supporting, I think he even used the term going all in on those two to help with your athletic department in total. But Adam, my final thing that I was going to say is something that we talked a little bit about on the emergency pod. Just the absolute wide-ranging interest, curiosity, excitement from people. I think the excitement is from people who love the Tar Heels, and then you can kind of spread that out to curiosity about what's going to happen to so many people around the sport of football at every level are going to be tuned in to what happens with Carolina. Does this work? And I think at least on the local level, the amount of interest is extraordinarily high. I mean, you and I, and I'm guessing a ton of Tar Heels have been getting tons of messages from people they know that like the Tar Heels who, I can't believe it, oh, Chapel Bill, all these different things. Just the interest, the excitement, the curiosity, again, all of that, it's really high right now. It's probably going to wane a little bit until it pops back up around the spring game. Then it'll wane a little bit until we start counting down to the season in late July and August, and it's going to be at a fever pitch again. So, these next 8 months or so leading up to the first game, 8-9 months, are going to be wild.
Carolina football kind of took the first ever 12-team college football playoff out of the news.
Yeah, for a day or two. Absolutely.
I mean, it's been all Carolina football at the top of every show. And you had the advantage of, you didn't have to do anything other than take the job to get those stories, and now you have to do things. But I do think the choices he makes and some staff selections are going to be news because it's Bill Belichick making those decisions. And like we talked about on Wednesday night, I think I underestimated that level of attention from general football world. I understood it was a big deal at Carolina, and I understood it would be a big deal in the ACC. But even beyond college football and football land, I think it's a big deal. I think you're going to turn on NFL games on Sunday and see those shows talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a return on the money you're spending.
Already, yes.
And with that in mind, you're going to get emails from the Rams Club if you haven't already. And it's time to decide what you want to do here at the end of the year. But if this is something you want to support, now's the time.
One newsworthy thing, Adam, he did kind of in passing, I guess, confirm, as lightly confirmed as it can be in the way that it was said, that Freddie Kitchens is going to be a part of his staff at Carolina. Coach Kitchens, who's been the tight ends coach for the last couple of years at Carolina and is currently the interim head coach, and at least my understanding is going to be the head coach for the bowl game coming up in a couple of weeks against Connecticut in the Fenway Bowl, that he would be a part of the staff. And it was clear that he has been someone that has been in contact with Bill Belichick. And so interesting that Coach Kitchens, who has a history in the NFL as well, of course, was the head coach at the Browns for a season or two and has a long history in pro football. He was someone that played a key role.
I think the thing I would have liked to have heard more about, and maybe we'll get to talk more about this next week, Coach Belichick did mention that he met with the team, and we saw several members of the team at the press conference. J.J. Jones was there. Bo Atkinson was there. Will Hardy was there. There may have been others, but those are the ones that I personally
think Chris
saw.
Culliver may have been there. There were a couple other guys that I couldn't quite see clearly, but I know for sure Bo Atkinson, Will Hardy, and J.J. Jones.
I would have liked to know something about what the message was at that meeting. I don't know. That may be one of the only times he sees that group together ever, but certainly in the next couple of weeks. What are the expectations? What's next there? You've got some guys who are making decisions about, are they coming or going? Are they doing both at the same time sometimes? So I would have liked to hear about that, and I'm sure we will in the weeks to come.
Well, you've already seen two Tar Heels, two starting offensive linemen in Austin Blaskey and Aiden Banfield had both put their name in the transfer portal, and they both pulled it out and said they're staying. So you've already seen some of that occur.
Yeah, and Michael Lombardi said on his podcast, which this is the world we live in now, that offensive and defensive lines are a priority, as are a quarterback.
So, big step for Carolina football today, and a long journey ahead of us to see what happens with Bill Belichick now as the head coach of the Heels. Adam, anything else before we talk a little basketball?
No.